Hey, it's me again. I changed clothes real fast. It is awesome to be hanging out with you guys today. Welcome to the summit. Hey to you guys watching online. Thanks for watching with us. Hey, if you're a first-time guest with us today at the summit, then we think it is crazy cool that you have chosen to spend part of your weekend with us. And so after the service, if you have any questions about the summit, you can go out to our guest services team that's out there on the patio. They also have a gift for you just for hanging out with us today. So, that's the place to be, right? So go check them out after the service. Now, tonight is the night, you guys. It is worship night tonight. It's going to be crazy fun. We're going to sing with the band all night long. It's going to be good times. If you haven't RSVP'd yet, there is still time for that. Just go to our app or website and do that because we're having all of our campuses come in together and worship together. So it's going to be an awesome, cool night that you do not want to miss. So be here at 7 o'clock tonight. Now, another fun thing that we have coming up in July is our Camp Kids Summit. I look forward to this week all year. It is crazy fun for kids and for adults. Get your kids registered. You can register to volunteer. It is so fun, you guys. All you got to do is go to the website, campkidsummit.net, and register there. Has anybody registered yet? Yeah. There's over 200 and some kids already registered. We want all the kids. Bring them on. I love it. All right, so on Friday evening, our Impact students got back from Big Stuff. Let me hear. We have a bunch of our Impact students in here. Some of them are dressed in 80s attire, which is very fly. Y'all look totally rad. I love it. So they had an awesome week at Big Stuff Camp in Panama City. A really cool thing that happened on Thursday afternoon is they had a baptism in the ocean. Now, there were over 200 people that went, 23 students, and 3 leaders got baptized. So very cool. It was awesome. They went on Facebook and did a live video of that, but if you did not get to see that when it happened, it's still on Facebook, so you can go to our Facebook page and check that out. Now, for the next hour, guys, you're going to get to hear an awesome message. You're going to sing with these guys right here in just a minute. It's going to be awesome. If you don't know the words to the songs that we're singing, then the lyrics will be on the screen, so feel free to sing when you catch on. So let's do that. Stand up. Let's sing with the band.
Like Elise said, we're glad you're here. I'm James. This is Brian. We're going to be leading you guys this morning. Sing these out with us. Now the darkness fades into new beginnings as we lift our eyes to a hope beyond. All creation waits with an expectation to declare the reign of the Lord our God. Let's sing this out. Here we go. We will not be moved when the earth gives way. For the risen one is overcome, and for every fear there's an empty grave. For the risen one is overcome. Now the silence breaks in the name of Jesus, as the heavens cry and the earth responds. All creation shouts with a voice of triumph to declare the reign of the Lord our God. Now sing this out. We will not be moved when the earth gives way. For the risen one is overcome. And for every fear there's an empty grave. For the risen one is overcome. Sing this out together. He shall reign forever. has overcome. For you and me, and for every fear, there's an empty grave. For the risen one has overcome. We will not be moved, and the earth gives way. For the risen one has overcome. And for every fear, there's an empty grave. For the risen one has overcome.
You guys sound so good. You guys sound a little rowdy today. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Let's just keep this rolling. Sing this out with me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one you could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in the rough to those around me. You guys sound so good. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder worship in song, but we also worship with our lives and with the stories that God puts in us. We have such a powerful story to share with you guys this morning. So we're going to continue to worship through story. So right where you're standing, let's all listen to Lisa's story. It's amazing.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and this is my victory story. In 1999, after a 2-year courtship, I got married. He was from a good family, I was from a good family. We worked, we went to church, and we started a family of our own. In 2008, I found myself a divorced single parent. My children were 2, 5, and 7. It was the scariest time of my life. I was afraid. I was afraid of all of the things that I had to do on my own. I had a home. I had to take care of the outside, the housework, the grocery shopping, my children, and all of their events, all while working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Hopelessness and fear set up inside my heart like they were renting space. I drank too much. I avoided people that at one time I loved to be around. It took time for me to start realizing that God wanted me to look for Him even during this darkest time. You see, before my divorce, God had been very present in my life, and I knew that He had walked before me in other times. And so slowly, I started looking for God and for good in each day. I learned that starting to focus on other people and put others' needs before my own took a little bit of the sting out of what I was going through. I started to try to love myself the way God loved me, and to see the broken me the way that God saw me. My children are now 16, 14, and 12. We own our own home again. Our life is still crazy, but my family is good. Like a lighthouse to a sailor, God's light shines on us. Sometimes it's so dim and so far in the distance we can barely see it through the fog. But as we draw closer to God and He draws closer to us, the light becomes stronger and brighter. God calls us to be lighthouses to others in this world, and that is why I share my victory story.
No height, no depth, no life or final breath could ever separate us from your love. No failure, no mistake, no loneliness or pain could ever separate us from your love. Let's sing that again. Could ever separate us from your love. And on the other side of everything I'm afraid of, you were standing with your arms wide open, wide open. Even in my deepest doubts and wonder, you were standing with your arms wide open. Wide open. I'm healed, made strong. I found where I belong. Forever I'm alive now in your love. I'm changed, unchanged by your amazing grace. Forever on the other side of everything I'm afraid my bed in darkness, if I try my best to hide, you know the farthest ocean, you give the morning its light. I can't run from your presence, 'cause there's no place that far. So I run to you, my Savior. There's safety in your arms. If I make my bed in darkness, if I try my best to hide, you know the farthest ocean, you give the morning its light. I can't run from your presence, there's no place that far. So I run to you, my Savior. There's safety in your arms, yeah. There's safety in your arms, yes. Now sing this out. On the other side of everything I'm afraid of, you are standing with your arms wide open. Sing it out. Wide open. Even in my deepest doubts and wonder, you are standing with your arms wide open. Wide open. On the other side of everything I'm afraid of, you are standing with your arms wide open. Wide open. Even in my deepest doubts and wonder, you are standing with your arms wide open. Wide open. Guys, thank you so much for singing with us this morning. You guys can go ahead and take a seat and check out the screens.
A long, long time ago, there was a man named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, and he loved them very much, but he loved Joseph the most. Naturally, Joseph's older brothers hated him, so they said, "Let's kill him." Whoa, wow. But the oldest brother said, "How about we just throw him in a pit?" Okay, said the brothers, so they threw him in the pit. Then they decided to sell him to a group of slave traders for 20 pieces of silver. We're rich! Joseph ended up serving a powerful man named Potiphar. God made it so Joseph did everything really well. So well, in fact, that Potiphar put him in charge of his whole household. Until one day, Potiphar's wife cornered him. "Dang, Joe, you look good," she said. "Miss Potiphar," said Joseph, "I could never." And he ran away. But Potiphar's wife pulled off his cloak and screamed. "Oh no," said Potiphar. So Potiphar threw Joseph in prison. Joseph was in prison for a long time. He felt like he had been forgotten. Then one day, he got a huge break and did something great for the king. As a result, the king pulled Joseph out of prison and put him in charge of everything. Everything was beginning to turn around for Joseph. And one day, Joseph had the chance to get even with his brothers. "We're terrified," they said. "It's okay. I forgive you," said Joseph. And they all lived happily ever after.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. So as you can see, Jonathan is not up here. I am Austin. I'm the worship pastor here at the Summit, and I'm super excited to get the chance to wrap up our Joseph series, Living the Dream, today. First thing, though, I was sitting on the front row here, and I came to an awesome and terrible realization at the same time. The band sounds fantastic without me. So we'll make sure this is a rare thing, right? No, they're awesome, and I'm really excited to get to change it up. Most of the time I'm singing with these guys back here, but today I get to speak. And I want to catch you up to speed for anybody who hasn't been here for maybe any part of this series or maybe bits and pieces. We just saw a cool video that recapped a little bit of the story of Joseph. But let me get you up to speed to where we're at right now. So basically, Joseph was in a family where he had a lot of siblings. And for anybody who has a lot of siblings, or maybe even one sibling, you know that Joseph made a terrible mistake by telling them that he was his dad's favorite kid, right? So big mistake, Joseph. So the brothers got really angry. They decided, you know what, we'll kill him. And they're like, no. Let's just cover up his death. We'll sell him into slavery, make a little cash on the side. And so Joseph finds himself a slave in Egypt. He later finds himself in prison because of a false accusation. And then where we landed last week was he gets out of prison because he gets the chance to interpret a dream for Pharaoh, who's in charge of all of Egypt. And Pharaoh basically makes Joseph second in command over Egypt, in charge of selling grain because there's a famine, but Egypt has enough food for everybody. And so Joseph finds himself here at a pretty good spot in his story. Now, there's more to his story, but if I'm Joseph, I feel like at this point, I would have felt like, okay, I have arrived. Everything that I've been through has come to an end. Maybe I'm at terms with my past. I get it. I went through this hard time, but now I'm here in Egypt. I'm living my best life, and this is awesome, right? Well, we know that he had at least come to terms with what had happened because of what he chose to name his kids. This is pretty interesting. Check this out. It says, Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. And then Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. First, I'll be the one to say it, terrible names for kids, right? Imagine, I'm trying to imagine my first child being born and me looking at this beautiful baby and saying, you know what you look like? You look like I'm over my past. It's great. No, but look, this is what Joseph did, and he's not here to defend himself, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So Joseph names his kids, hey, I've forgotten about my father's family and everything that's happened to me now I see as, being fruitful and where I'm at right now. So I'm over my past. This is behind me, and I'm just going to do my thing and help rule Egypt and sell grain. And so Joseph's dad back home, not knowing that Joseph has anything to do with this in Egypt at all or anything, but they're experiencing some of this famine as well. They're running out of food too. And so Jacob says, you know what? We need to do something about this. And he says one of the best dad quotes in the entire Bible to his kids to tell them to go get some food. He says, when Jacob heard that grain was available in Egypt, he said to his sons, why are you standing around looking at one another? I've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy enough grain to keep us alive. Otherwise, we'll die. I remember moments like this with my dad. I don't know about y'all, but you can probably tell by looking at me, I'm not really a car guy, right? Still, y'all shouldn't laugh when I say that. There's definitely was a season of my life when I think my dad wanted me to be a car guy because he was into cars, and he used to tell me, hey, let's go out to the garage and let's work on this. Well, he quickly found out that about the best thing I had to offer was to hold the flashlight while he actually worked on the cars. And he used to say to me, he would get so frustrated, and he would say, what are you standing there looking at? Help me hold this. And I'm like, look, Dad, you just asked me to hold the flashlight. I'm just doing what I was told. So I think the brothers here are having the same type of experience with their dad. He's like, what are you standing around for? Go to Egypt and get some grain, get some food, so we don't die from starvation. And so Joseph's brothers, they begin to head over to Egypt. Now, again, remember, Jacob, Joseph's dad, thinks that his son is dead, thinks that Joseph is dead. The brothers, they know, okay, we at least haven't seen him since we shipped him off here into slavery. So maybe he's alive, maybe he's not. So they are definitely not expecting to run in to Joseph, right? So his brothers are heading to Egypt to buy some food. And I imagine Joseph's been kind of selling grain all day to people coming in and getting food because he was in charge of that. And somebody taps him on the shoulder, hey, we got one more family back here that's come a long way. They want to buy some food too. And so Joseph's like, all right, turns around and sees his brothers. Now, for some of you, you might get excited when you see family. For some of you, you might be terrified when you see family too. I don't know what kind of family you have. But Joseph is definitely not excited when he sees his brothers. Because, I mean, look, he's looking in the face of the people who had basically ruined a decade or more of his life. I mean, these guys threw him in a pit. They've lied to his father. They're the reason Jacob thinks he's dead. Sold him into slavery. He's been in prison because of these guys. I mean, they literally were the root of all of his problems. And so I'm sure Joseph kind of panics a little bit here. Well, do they recognize me? What do I say? What's about to happen? And the good news is they don't recognize Joseph. So he has a little bit of relief, potentially the same type of relief that we feel maybe when we're in the store or something and we see somebody in the distance that might recognize us and we hope that they don't. Maybe it's somebody from high school. Or maybe it's that person that you know, and I love this person, but I know if I talk to them, I got to give them like an hour. Like they're gonna see. If you've never ran into anybody like that, and you might potentially be that person. But anyways, so Joseph has one of these moments where I think he sees the person, they don't recognize him, and he tries to do that smooth kind of cart turn and head the other way, but he's got nowhere to go. So he's got to think of something to get them out of there so he can gather his thoughts, some kind of plan. So he says, you know what? You guys must be spies. Get out of here. He sends them out of his presence. He has to come up with something to do. So if you want to go back and read this story in Genesis, you can. But there's several chapters of back and forth. Joseph sees his brothers, and they have a conversation. They leave. Then they come back. They have another conversation. They leave. There's lots of stuff that's happening in between here. But finally, Joseph reaches a point where he can't conceal his identity any longer. And his brothers are in front of him again, and he begins to just weep uncontrollably. He's just overwhelmed with emotion. Now, imagine what the brothers are thinking right now, because they have no idea that this is Joseph. All they see is this Egyptian ruler who's already accused them of being spies. Can't make up his mind whether they should stay or go. He's sent them away. He's brought them back all these times. And now this dude is weeping in front of them. I would be terrified. I'm sure they're terrified because they're like, man, this guy thinks we're spies and he's emotionally unstable. We're dead. We're goners, right? So, and Joseph has all the power in the world right now to say, hey, just kill these guys. I'm tired of messing with them. Get them out of here. Send them back to their home with no food. They don't even deserve this. He has all the power to get revenge, but he responds in a really interesting way. And I want to read this. Here's how Joseph responds to his brothers. I'm Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. I can see why. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Please come closer, he said to them. So they came closer, and he said again, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. He's like, ringing a bell? Hey, it's me. But don't be upset, and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. So this is where it's getting interesting here. Hey, you did all this, but hey, don't be upset with yourself. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine that has ravaged the land for 2 years will last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. But again, God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here. I hope you're seeing a trend here in his response. Not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace, and the governor of all Egypt. So this is really interesting because, again, Joseph has all the power and all the reason to blame the people who, you would say is responsible for all his troubles and his hardships. But he continues to say, you know what? Hey, you sold me into slavery. I'm sure you've been beating yourself up about that. But you know what? Hey, you should forgive yourselves. I've forgiven you. Because I can see now that it was God. It was God who sent me here, not you. And so Joseph does what he says he's going to do. He's going to take care of their whole family. He actually moves his dad and his brothers over to Egypt and takes care of them. He's reunited with his dad, which was such a big deal for Joseph because Jacob, up until this point, thought that he was dead. So he gets to see that his son's alive. There's an awesome reunion. And so they're living there for a couple of years, and Joseph's dad dies. And when he does, the brothers have another crazy freak out moment because they say, you know what? What if Joseph was just being nice to us so he could be reunited with dad? Now that dad's dead, what if we're goners too? What if Joseph's just going to decide, you know what, hey, dad's dead, he's out of the picture. I don't have to keep him happy anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and kill you guys like I should have in the first place. So he gets a chance to respond again to his family, and this is how he chooses to respond. But Joseph replied to his brothers, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me. This is so good. But God intended it all for good. Again, pointing to God, he brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. Guys, I don't know that I would have responded this way. I might have chose to take revenge. I don't know. I know this isn't generally my first response to people who have done me wrong. Now, this is a great response. In fact, this is the best response. Grace, forgiveness. Hey, don't beat yourself up about it. Like, I can see how God was working in my life. So I get that this is a great response, but I am more interested in how and why Joseph was able to respond this way, more so than just the way he responded. And here's why I think he was able to respond to his family like this. You remember how Pastor Jonathan has said throughout this series, he said, look, when Joseph is in his story that we're reading right now, Joseph did not know that he was Joseph, right? So throughout all of the things that we've been discussing for the past 3 weeks until now, Joseph has not had a moment where things have kind of wrapped up, they've come full circle, and he's been able to look back on his entire journey and see how God had been working this whole time. Now, I believe that when he sees the fact that he's been able to take care of his own family, he's been able to save the lives of so many other people, he has this moment where things have come full circle for him, and he says, oh, okay, I see now that had I not been sold into slavery, I would have never gotten to Egypt. And then if I hadn't been thrown into prison, I wouldn't have been able to interpret this dream for Pharaoh and be put in the position that I'm in right now and be able to save all these lives. I see God's faithfulness in my life. And because Joseph was able to see God's faithfulness along his story and all of these instances that had been so painful for him, because he could see God's faithfulness, he was able to respond this way to his family. So here's what I think. Good for you, Joseph. But I'm not Joseph. And you're not Joseph either. And so how do we get to a place where this is our first response. How do we get to a place where before our story is over, maybe before we see things come full circle in our lives, we can see and trust that God is faithful and working even when maybe we can't physically see it? How do we get to that place? Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't think that Joseph, throughout his story, probably kept, the best positive attitude the entire way through. Now, we read when things come full circle, I see all this, oh, God, you've been working in my life this whole time. But I imagine there were some hard times when he's a slave, when he's in prison, and probably some times where he's saying, God, why are you doing this to me? Why have you brought me here? Why am I experiencing this? Why would you do this to me? And I know these are questions that we've all asked at some point in our life, sitting in this room. God, why me? But what Joseph was able to learn in his story, and what I want to encourage you with today, is that my interpretation of God's actions does not determine God's intentions. Here's how I know this, because even if Joseph had a difficult time and said, God, why me, when he was in prison, that didn't stop the fact that God was prepping him to be able to save his family's life. Just because he interpreted this in a negative way did not change what God was doing behind the scenes. And I see this true for me with my kids. I've got a 2-year-old named Sadie and a 4-year-old named Reese, potentially the cutest kids on the planet. So Reese has started doing this thing. It's most of the time around bedtime when she doesn't want to go to bed. And I'll, say something to her. And her response to me is, Dad, her voice is much higher than mine. Dad, when you say this, it really hurts my heart. You're laughing, but man, it rips me in two, right? It's like, how did you think of that? You're 4. Where did you get this? So she says, Dad, it really hurts my heart. I said, babe, all I told you was you can't dump your whole bag of goldfish in your bed. Right, we see this maybe with younger kids too, where, the child has maybe thrown themselves on the ground and, it's the end of the world. They're just screaming, and you come in the room and you're like, honey, what's wrong? What's wrong? I told them they shouldn't put their fingers in the electrical outlet. But to them, maybe they wanted to explore this, they want to try this out. We say no, or we make a different decision. They interpret it as negative. They're just, this is the worst thing. Gosh, if Dad would only let me put my finger in the electrical outlet. But guess what? See, it's our role as parents to see the bigger picture that our kids can't see sometimes. Look, I know as a dad that you are actually not going to have much fun if you're electrocuted. But she doesn't see that. It's my role to see that, and it's her role to learn to trust me with what she can see. And see, this translates over to our relationship with God as our Heavenly Father. It's His role to see the big picture. It's my role to learn to trust Him in the little snapshot of my life that I can see. And this is where we get so frustrated sometimes, myself included. So I'm a planner. I don't know if we have any planners in the room, but if you're a planner, props to you. I get you. I used to get so frustrated when I was a kid because my dad would say, sometimes we would have these moments where, and if your kid's in the room, don't try this. It never worked out for me. But I would get my friend, I'll be like, you know what? If we corner mom or dad and we ask them this together, there's no way they can say no to both of us, right? And so we would, get together, find a parent, can we go to the movies? Or can they spend the night or stay longer? And my dad used to tell me, this was always his response. He would say, son, I would love to do stuff like that if we plan for it. If we plan for it, we can do that next time. And I'm like, why can't my family be spontaneous like everybody else's family? And now, as an adult, I'm like, we're not doing it if it's not on the calendar. If I don't have a couple of days' notice, we can't do it. But we get frustrated at the unknown and what we can't see sometimes, especially in our relationship with God. If we can't see God working in our life, we can't see where he's going, we can't see what he's doing, we get so frustrated and bent out of shape. But you know what? We can't see where God is going, but I'll tell you what we can see. We can see where he's been. We can see where he's been. That's our job. You know what? If we can understand, I will never be able to see where God is going in the future. That's his thing. That is not my thing. So I have to look at where he's been. That's the trick of not being so overwhelmed sometimes by what we can't see. That's the trick to learning to trust God's faithfulness, even when we can't see him moving in our lives. And I think Joseph, as things were coming, full circle for him, not when they were quite there yet. I talked about Joseph probably having some negative moments and saying, God, why have you done this to me? Well, I'm sure on the other side of those moments, he also had some moments where he said, okay, look, I get that I'm in prison. But you know what? I do remember when my brothers were going to kill me, and then they didn't. So I see God spared my life there. I could see where he's been there in my past. And then when I was sold into slavery, at least I got the best gig in slavery, if that exists, with Potiphar, right? And so he can say, okay, I see that God, you were faithful in my life here. I see where you've been. And so when he's in prison, he's able to look back. He's like, God, I can't see where you're going, but I can look back at where you've been. I see how you've been faithful in my life in these other instances. So God, I believe that in this situation and circumstance that you will be faithful as well. How do we do that? I think for someone who's been following Jesus for a long time, maybe what you would say is a mature Christian or believer or something like that, it's probably a little bit easier for you to look back and see all these years and examples of God's faithfulness to you in your life over and over and over and over again. And so you're able to say, oh man, this is hard right now, but you know what? God was faithful here, he was faithful here, he was faithful here. So there's no way I can doubt that he's going to be faithful right now in this situation that I don't understand yet. But what if that's not you? What if you just started following Jesus? What if you don't have 50 years of God's faithfulness and all those awesome reminders behind you? What if you just made a decision to follow Jesus recently, and now this is like the first hard thing that you have encountered that Jesus is supposed to help you with, and you're saying, where is God in my life? I would encourage you, don't look at your own experiences. Lean into the experiences of the people around you. I believe that God puts people in our lives and in our path for that reason. And if you've been through something, you're on the other side and you can see God's faithfulness in that, I believe that now you have the ability and opportunity to share that story with somebody else who's going through the same thing and help them lean into your experience as well. We lean into other people's experiences all the time in other areas of our lives. So I don't know sometimes why it's so difficult for us to do that with God. But it's like before we buy anything online, I don't know about you, but I read reviews. Especially on Amazon, looking through, reading reviews. It's like I don't have experience with this. So before I buy it, I'm going to lean in to what people say who have had experiences with this. And now here's the thing, if you're talking about God, you will hear some people have some great stuff to share. And you'll hear some people that have some negative things to share. But if you are looking for God's faithfulness in your life, your job is to lean into those positive experiences, the encouragement, the stories where people can encourage you and say, hey, I know you might not see it yet, but trust me, God is going to be faithful. Our kids lean into our own experiences like that. It's like the first time a kid ever hears thunder, sometimes they're scared to death. It's like, what is this? And then somebody, maybe a parent, maybe an older sibling, anything like that, is able to say, hey, you know what? I remember being scared of thunder too. It's actually just a noise. Like, it can't hurt you at all. So don't be scared of this. And so the kid makes a decision, says, okay, that sounds great. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I guess maybe they're still scared. But my kids have at least leaned into me and said, you know what? Dad, I trust your experience with this. I'm going to lean into that, take your word for it, because I just don't have anything in my own life to compare it to yet. So we have to do that with people around us who have experienced God's faithfulness so they can encourage us along the way. And for you, if you're in here and you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe you're here because a coworker bribed you. I don't know. Or maybe you're like, hey, I don't know. I heard they had food a couple weeks ago. Maybe they'll have food again today. Either way, you're here. But you're like, I don't even have people around me really that I hang out with that might have these experiences. And I would just challenge you with this question. Just ask yourself, and I want you to dig deep for this. Have you had those things in your life that you've experienced where you've chalked it up to good luck or karma or an accident or anything like that? Where you said, man, something great happened to me. Maybe you said, you know what, it's about time. Oh, I deserve that. It's about time, something like that. Maybe not. Maybe you're a very humble and generous person, but you just called it different things. I would ask yourself, has this been evidence of God's faithfulness in my life, and I just didn't know what to call it yet? Because you know what? My interpretations of God's actions don't determine God's intentions. And I think, you know what? Whether you've chosen to acknowledge God's faithfulness in your life or not at this point does not change the fact that God is faithful. And that he loves you. And that he sent his son to give his life for you. And he wants to be in relationship with you. He did all that for you. If anything, guess what? Man, that's a huge sign of his faithfulness in your life. So here's the thing. I believe with everything in me that no matter what situation or circumstance or pit or prison that you find yourself in, if you look for God's faithfulness, you will find that God is faithful. That is our job. That is our role in all of this. God's role is to see the big picture, to orchestrate the story. Even when we can't see it, he's working for our good. Even when things were intended to harm us, God works those for our good. Even in the times where we cannot see where God is going, the thing that keeps our sanity is that we can look back at where he's been. So even when you doubt that maybe God has been faithful or will be faithful to you, know that if you look for his faithfulness, I believe you'll find it. Let me pray for you. God, thank you so much for stories like this that we can turn to in your word and read of someone else's experiences, God, that speaks so much into what we're experiencing right now in our own lives. And so, God, for the person who's followed you for a long time, would you just remind them today, this week, the next time that they face something hard, God, that you have not forgotten about them, and they can see instances of you being faithful over and over and over again in their lives. And God, would you challenge them to be the person for somebody else who doesn't have those experiences? God, to be that person they can lean into. Challenge them to share what you've done for them and how you've been faithful. And God, for the person who has never acknowledged your faithfulness, God, I pray that they would be able to see you in their lives, if today even is just the first time. So God, again, thank you that no matter what we do, no matter what we can see, no matter how we feel or how we interpret what you are doing, thank you, God, for always being faithful and never changing that. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. That was really, really awesome, and I so appreciate Austin's words and what he has reminded us of God's faithfulness today. I was there, what he was talking about, like a month and a half ago. I was totally like, I cannot see where this is going. I was mad and like, this stinks kind of thing. I told God I was mad, and like, if we can't be real with God, who can be real with, right? But I just felt like he just left me out there. And I had some amazing friends that came around me and said, hey, this stinks. Hey, I've been there. It's going to be all right. You're going to get through this. It's hard right now. I had friends who reminded me of God's faithfulness and how he wanted great things for me and to do great things through me. And so now I'm starting to see some of that greatness. I'm starting to come out of that pit a little bit, and I know there's going to be more greatness on the horizon too, but man, get those friends around you, get those people that lift you up and remind you of who God is. It's an awesome thing to have friends like that. This is our very last week of Living the Dream series, guys. It has been so awesome. We got a new series starting next week. It's called Miracles, and it's all about the miracles that Jesus performed during his ministry. So there may be stories that you've heard before, maybe not, or we're going to talk through them together. We're going to learn stuff together. It's going to be awesome. So y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.